Our first encounter felt like a scene straight out of a romantic comedy, unfolding at a friend's barbecue. A small mishap with spilled drinks led to an awkward moment, but Logan's effortless charm and quick wit had me laughing in no time, easing my embarrassment. His humor was contagious, and soon, our shared laughter became the soundtrack of a connection that felt so natural. It was as if we'd known each other for years. It didn't take long for us to become inseparable, and our bond felt destined. Our wedding was simple but perfect, a small, intimate gathering with close friends and family. Logan's career in finance was thriving, and because of our differing financial situations, he suggested a prenuptial agreement. I understood why, but it didn't bother me. My love for him wasn't tied to money. However, what did trouble me was his mother, Margot. Her cold demeanor stood in sharp contrast to the warmth Logan and I shared. But I was so caught up in the happiness of our life together that I didn't let her skepticism affect me. Even when we learned of Logan's infertility, a revelation that could have torn us apart, my love and commitment to him only grew stronger. I poured my heart into making his mother's house a home, spending my savings to furnish it and fill it with love. As time went on, however, the warmth between us began to fade. It was replaced by a growing tension that I couldn't ignore. Logan's once gentle requests turned into sharp demands. "Make sure breakfast is on the table before I leave, Eliza," he'd say, his voice now devoid of the affection it once held. Despite my demanding job at the Department of Health and Human Services, I did my best to meet his expectations, preparing elaborate meals, hoping to revive the spark we once had. But my efforts went unnoticed, taken for granted. What once were conversations full of dreams and laughter became exchanges filled with frustration and resentment. "This is my house, Eliza," he'd snap, diminishing my role and presence each day. As I tended to our home, the cracks in our relationship became impossible to ignore. The idea of being alone, once terrifying, now felt like a comforting thought. One evening, as the silence of our house enveloped me, I realized with painful clarity that the man I had married was now a stranger to me. The love that had once guided us had faded into a longing for a life where I felt valued and appreciated. As I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I couldn't escape the growing distance between us. Alone with my thoughts, I wondered if perhaps I would be better off on my own. I couldn't answer that question yet, but it lingered, soft and persistent in the quiet. With each passing day, that whisper in my heart grew louder, urging me to rediscover myself and reclaim the happiness I once had. Living with Logan had become like living with someone I didn't recognize, someone who found fault in everything. The house wasn't clean enough. The dinners weren't exciting enough. What once felt like a partnership now felt like an endless cycle of criticism and disappointment. No matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. In search of solace, I'd wander alone through malls, buying new furniture and gadgets for our home, trying to fill the growing void with material things. Yet, the fleeting joy these purchases brought vanished the moment I returned to his indifference. It was a harsh realization when I noticed that Logan hadn't contributed a dime to our joint account for months. The burden of our expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, had all been falling on my paycheck. One evening, I mustered the courage to address this imbalance. I approached him as he lounged in his armchair, his attention glued to the TV. "Logan, we need to talk about the finances. You haven't added anything to the joint account in months, and I've been covering it all," I said, my voice steady, hoping for some acknowledgement or an apology. He barely looked at me, his eyes still fixed on the television. "It's my house. You're just living in it. Why should I pay for your upkeep?" he retorted, his words cutting deep. I was stunned. "Your upkeep, Logan. I'm your wife, not some tenant. I've been paying for everything, trying to make this a home for us both," I argued, my anger rising. He scoffed, coughed dismissively, a sound that chilled me. "Eliza, you're making a big deal out of nothing. If you don't like it, maybe you should just leave. But we both know you've got nowhere to go," he said, turning back to his show. I was boiling with hurt and anger, But before I could say more, his phone rang. It was his mother, Margot, and he answered on speaker before I could slip away. She chimed in. "Eliza, you need to stop this nonsense and start showing some gratitude. Logan's been too good to you, and here you are acting like a freeloader." Her words struck me like a slap. Shocked, I managed to snatch the phone and hang up. "I can't believe you and your mother are calling me a freeloader in my own home," I said, my voice quivering with emotion. Logan just shrugged, unmoved. "Well, if the shoe fits." That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt more isolated than ever. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind, now more persistent. But where would I go? I had no apartment and no savings of my own. I felt trapped in a life that was no longer mine, married to a man who saw me as nothing more than a burden. The next morning, I awoke to an empty bed and a heavy heart. As I moved silently through the house, every room echoed with the remnants of our fight. I knew I needed a change, but the fear of starting over was paralyzing. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, I faced a tough decision. Do I stay in this loveless marriage, playing the role of the grateful freeloader, or do I take a leap into the unknown, hoping to find my footing? The answer was still unclear, but the call for change was undeniable. I realized I couldn't continue living this way. The tipping point had arrived, and it was time for me to choose my path forward. That day at work felt endless, a string of meetings with no break in sight. Glancing at the clock, I knew Logan would be irate. Under my breath, I muttered about my misfortune as I reached for my phone to give him a heads up. The moment he answered, his anger erupted through the speaker, loud enough for my whole office to overhear, making my cheeks flush with embarrassment. "This is your problem, Eliza. You should have been home cooking dinner, not wasting time at work," he bellowed. I quickly ended the call, shrinking away from the curious gazes of my colleagues. By the time I arrived home, it was far past our usual dinner time. The house was dark and eerily silent, but as soon as I stepped inside, Logan unleashed his fury like a storm. "Where have you been? A good wife would have dinner ready. What are you even good for?" His harsh words felt like daggers slicing through my last shred of patience. Exhausted and emotionally drained, I responded, "Logan, I had to work. You know this project is important," but it was like speaking to a brick wall. "A bad wife and a terrible hostess, that's what you are," he shouted, his voice hitting a pitch I had never heard before. Suddenly, he declared, "You know what? I've had enough. Pack your things and get out of my house." I stood there stunned as he thrust divorce papers into my hands. "You'll be homeless without me," he sneered with a cruel laugh. Something inside me snapped. All the years I had spent bending backward for him, trying to be the perfect wife, evaporated. "Living in a shelter would be better than enduring one more day with you," I retorted, my voice more stable than I felt. Without another word, I signed the divorce papers. I packed my belongings into a suitcase, the gravity of my decision dawning on me as I looked around what used to be our house. It no longer felt like a home. It was merely a shell filled with broken promises and shattered dreams. I booked a room at a nearby hotel, seeking refuge from the turmoil. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, I realized it was the first night in years I didn't have to worry about Logan's dinner preferences or whether the house met his exacting standards. It was just me, and oddly, it felt liberating. Leaving was difficult, perhaps the hardest decision I'd ever made. But as I drifted to sleep, a part of me was excited about what the future might hold. For the first time in a long time, I was in control of my destiny, no longer bound to someone who diminished my worth. After settling into the hotel, reality began to sink in. It wasn't long before I received a call from Margot, Logan's mother. Her voice was tinged with a gloating tone. "Eliza, dear, I just heard the wonderful news. My boy has finally come to his senses and divorced you. I'm celebrating tonight." Her words, intended to hurt, barely made impact. I was beyond caring what Margot thought. "Time will tell, Margot," I replied calmly, a newfound sense of detachment washing over me. I hung up, a small smile playing on my lips. For the first time in years, her sharp words couldn't touch me. A week of navigating my new reality had passed, and despite the challenges, I was ready to face them head-on. When I finally opened up to my boss about the overwhelming pressure I was feeling from pretending everything in my life was okay, I was carrying a heavy burden alone. I hoped for some sympathy or understanding from her, and her response became a lifeline I hadn't expected. "Eliza, I'm sorry to hear you're going through all this. There might be something that can help," she said, her voice transitioning from compassionate to professional. She informed me about a municipal housing program designed to assist individuals in tough situations like mine. It offered affordable housing options for those in need. "I think you should apply and I'll help you," she offered, her words a beacon of hope in the darkness that had engulfed my life. With her help, I applied for the program, and to my surprise, was accepted. The relief I felt was instantaneous. I could breathe again. Finally, I have a space that's truly mine. A small, unassuming apartment where tranquility reigns, a stark contrast to the chaotic existence I'd left behind. Gone are the days of tiptoeing around, of catering to an unappreciative husband. It's just me here, and the feeling is nothing short of liberating. Settling into my living room, still surrounded by a sea of unpacked boxes, I found myself reflecting on the arduous journey that had brought me here. It hasn't been easy, with moments of paralyzing self-doubt and fear, yet it's also been interwoven with unexpected kindnesses and a surge of inner strength I never knew I possessed. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, I'm genuinely excited about the future. It's as if I've been given a blank canvas, and I'm finally ready to start painting a new life, one where my happiness is solely my own responsibility. This isn't just a new start, it's a full-throated embrace of whatever the next chapter might hold. A few peaceful months drifted by, marked by the simple rhythms of my newfound freedom. Then, one quiet afternoon, the calm was shattered by the shrill ringing of my phone. The screen flashed a name I'd hoped to never see again. Margot, my former mother-in-law. My stomach plummeted. With a deep breath to steel myself, I answered, "Hello." The response was immediate, a piercing shriek. "Eliza, you need to get back to Logan this instant." Margot's voice was so piercing I had to yank the phone away from my ear. I sighed, the question escaping almost involuntarily. "Margot, why on earth would I do that?" The words were more for myself than for her. "Because he's in trouble, you fool. That son of mine bought shares years ago, took out all those loans, and now he's drowning in debt. It's a complete disaster, and you need to help him sort it all out," she demanded, her voice a chaotic mix of anger and raw desperation. A laugh bubbled up, not of amusement, but of sheer, incredulous disbelief. "Help him, Margot. Do you remember the prenup? The one Logan insisted on? It explicitly states that I am not accountable for his debts. And let's not forget, we're divorced. His financial quagmire is not my problem," I replied, my patience wearing thin. A sharp intake of breath came from the other end. "Ungrateful woman, after everything we've done for you, you're just going to abandon him?" Her tone was laced with accusation, as though I'd committed some unspeakable crime. "Everything you've done, Margot. Let's be clear. The only thing you and Logan ever managed was to make my life a living hell. And as for abandoning him? Please recall he's the one who threw me out, who made it abundantly clear that I was no longer welcome in his world or his house," I retorted sharply. "You'll regret this, Eliza," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're better off without him, but you're making a colossal mistake." I paused, taking a deep breath, surprised by the calmness I suddenly found. "Margot," I replied, "I've spent far too long living in a prison of regret and fear. I'm finally finding a sliver of peace, and I absolutely intend to hold on to it. Having reached my breaking point with Logan's self-made financial abyss, I knew it was time for him to take responsibility for his actions. So, I made the decisive choice to walk away and begin again." Concluding my conversation with Margot brought about an unexpected sense of closure. Rather than the anticipated wave of guilt or distress, a liberating sense of relief washed over me. By standing firm against Margot, I had effectively declared my secession from their twisted family drama. It was as if I'd finally shed an oppressive burden that I had carried far too long. After hanging up, I paused, taking a deep breath. A sigh of release I hadn't even realized I'd been holding back. That challenging exchange served as a poignant reminder of my journey toward reclaiming my independence and finding my own peace. A state I am determined to maintain, now impervious to manipulative guilt trips. For the first time in years, I experienced a true sense of liberation from the endless demands, the harsh criticisms, and the exhausting cycle of trying to please those who never valued me. I've discovered my own strength and found my voice, and I'm resolved to never let anyone diminish that again. Looking around my simple apartment, I felt a surge of accomplishment. This was my sanctuary, my fresh beginning. I had navigated through tumultuous times, emerging stronger each time, confident that no unexpected phone call could sway my newfound stability. The following morning, I awoke with a clear and firm determination. It was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I sifted through my documents, locating receipts for every significant purchase made during my years with Logan: the state-of-the-art dishwasher, the washing machine we selected together, though financed solely by me, and the premium coffee machine that had become central to his mornings. My actions were not just about retrieving financial investments, but about affirming my worth and contributions, refusing to let them be dismissed or overlooked. With the assistance of a moving truck and several helpers, I returned to what once felt like home, now just a hollow shell. The quietness of the place stood in stark contrast to the emotional chaos within me. As the movers began to remove the items, a mix of satisfaction and melancholy swept through me. Each piece held memories, but I knew that holding on to the past would only impede my progress. Just as the last box was loaded, his call pierced through the air, as inevitable as it was unwelcome. Logan, dispensing with even the pretense of a greeting, launched straight into his demand. "Where is all my stuff?" A knowing chuckle escaped me, a sound tinged with both amusement and a touch of triumph. "You mean the items I purchased with my money? I've reclaimed them, Logan. It's my right, after all." His response was a predictable torrent of anger and insults, the kind that would once have sent shivers of fear down my spine, but I was no longer that woman. "Logan," I stated firmly, my voice cutting through his tirade like a knife, "I genuinely wish you well, but our paths are diverging for good." With those words, I ended the call and swiftly blocked his number, a resolute action that severed the final tie to a past that no longer held any value for me. As the truck rumbled into motion, pulling away from that place, my heart soared, feeling lighter than it had in years. This moment transcended mere material reclamation. It was about the wholesale reclaiming of my life, my independence, and my self-worth. The journey to redefine myself was only just beginning, and I knew it wouldn't be without its challenges. Yet for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt fully equipped and utterly prepared to face them all, on my own terms. The initial coffee date led to dinner a few days later, and before long, regular walks in the park with Max, my dog, trotting happily alongside us, became our routine. He introduced me to his 3 children, bright and warm, who welcomed me with open arms and laughter. Everything felt so natural, as if a missing piece of my life, one I hadn't even realized was gone, had finally fallen into place. One quiet evening, after the kids had gone to bed and we were relaxing on his porch, he turned to me and said, "You know, I'm really glad I bought that painting." His voice was soft in the dimming twilight. I rested my head on his shoulder, smiling, and replied, "Me too." It's funny how life works out sometimes. Looking back on my journey, from feeling trapped and hopeless in a suffocating marriage to now standing on the edge of something beautiful and new, I felt completely free from the shadows of my past. I was ready to embrace whatever the future had in store, welcoming it with an open heart. As Max and I continued our morning walks, I often found myself reflecting on the path that had brought me here. The pain and struggle had been real, but they had led me to a place of peace and possibility. I was open to whatever came next, free from the past and ready to start a new chapter. Walking under the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, a deep sense of gratitude washed over me for every twist and turn that had brought me to this moment, ready to move forward. I stepped into the light, eager to see what life would bring next.